The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the staff, management, or sponsors of AM 1230 WBZT.
Welcome to the award-winning Justice Hour with attorney Lisa Macy. For the next hour, Lisa will focus on the law, government, and politics, and how they affect your life, your family, and the community. Now here's your host, Lisa Macy.
It's another fabulous evening here in Palm Beach. Thank you again for tuning into the Justice Hour. I'm your host, attorney Lisa Macy, and appropriate for the song "Bad Boys, Bad Boys." What are you going to do what you going to do when they come for you? I'm excited to have with me in the studio tonight guest William Shepard, who was Florida's former statewide prosecutor. He indicted former Republican Party of Florida Chair Jim Greer and several other public officials. But first, some Justice Hour legal history. On the date of June 21st, 1989, the Supreme Court held for the first time that a Texas conviction for public flag burning violated the First Amendment. Interesting how the burning of a flag violates the First Amendment, but as we saw this year, it was a big problem for a Florida preacher to burn the Koran, as he did. Also in this week in history, on June 30th, the 26th Amendment was ratified, giving 18-year-olds the right to vote. That was on June 30th, 1971. Amazing how it doesn't seem like it was so recent that the age for voting was actually lowered and the 26th Amendment was enacted on that date. Let me move on and let me tell you a little bit about tonight's guest, William Shepard. He graduated from Georgetown undergraduate and went to law school there. He was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. He clerked for federal judge Stephen N. Limbaugh and worked in the moved from District of Columbia and moved to Miami. He prosecuted in Miami for about 4.5 years and then moved to District of Columbia to work in a white-collar group, mostly environmental criminal law. Then he moved back to Miami and went to work as a prosecutor at the Statewide Office of Prosecution in Florida. Then he applied to be the statewide prosecutor, which is the top job, obviously at the statewide prosecution office. He competed with lawyers across the state and was chosen. Since then, he has gone on to work recently as a partner at the law firm of Holland and Knight. He does trial work and practices in the field of defending individuals and companies facing enforcement and criminal actions and commercial civil litigation. Bill Shepard, welcome to the Justice Hour.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, I see on your bio that you went to work for a federal judge named Stephen N. Limbaugh, and he was in Missouri. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm originally from St. Louis, as you said, and Judge Limbaugh was in the Eastern District of Missouri, originally from Cape Girardeau, but practicing later in St. Louis.
I've been to St. Louis. It's a very nice town. Did you enjoy it there?
It sure is. I love St. Louis. I have a lot of good friends there and a lot of good lawyers that I know who are practicing there as well.
I guess you've been to the Lake of the Ozarks?
I have.
I liked it there, and the Bush brothers are from that area as well.
There are a number of members of the Bush family from the St. Louis area.
Not
right.
The George Bush family. This is the Bush beer family.
Well, the Anheuser-Busch family, but also the political family of the Bushes also have a number of relatives in the St. Louis area.
Okay. I had a girlfriend of mine who was dating one of the Bush brothers, from the Missouri area. That's how I know that they're from there. Judge Stephen Limbaugh, is he any relation to Rush?
As a matter of fact, he is. He's Rush Limbaugh's uncle.
Isn't that interesting? Does Rush ever mention the fact that his uncle is a federal judge on the air?
I don't think that he mentions too much about his personal family life. And Steve Limbaugh Sr., the judge that I clerked for, his son, Steve Limbaugh Jr., was on the Missouri Supreme Court and was later the Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court, and now, interestingly, holds Judge Limbaugh's seat on the Federal District Court in St. Louis.
I didn't know Rush came from such a legal family.
Oh, it's actually a very prominent legal family in Missouri, and Steve Limbaugh's father was one of the oldest practicing lawyers in the country.
Wow. Very impressive. So you were the Florida Statewide Prosecutor, and as important as that position is, I don't think a lot of people in the state of Florida know that there is such a position or such an office. So can you tell us what the Office of Statewide Prosecution does and what type of cases that they handle?
Sure, Lisa, and you're right. I think that there are a lot of people who are not as familiar with it as you might think based on the breadth and scope of the work that the office does around the state. It was in the late 80s, in 1986, that, frankly, it was Floridians who created it through a constitutional amendment. And as it became apparent to those who were watching crime developments throughout our state, was that, frankly, a criminal activity was not really localized anymore. And groups that were involved in criminal conduct went where the marketplace was. And so you might have dopers who'd unload in the Keys and buy their guns in Orlando and sell up in Jacksonville. And it didn't make sense for individual local state attorneys to work those cases separately when you're talking about an organized criminal enterprise.
So this is typically a multi-jurisdictional criminal enterprise that is involved?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Statewide prosecution has 8 offices around the state and about 40 prosecutors who act almost as a strike force, really, to move into whatever the hot threat that poses our state and Floridians.
Did they ever get involved with the pill mills? Because I know that's a statewide problem now.
It is, but frankly, there was some involvement in it. But on the prescription drug side, when I was there, the issue that we were more focused on was drug diversion. And that's a real serious problem, not only from an organized crime standpoint, but frankly also from a public health standpoint.
What does that mean, drug diversion? Like the drugs are supposed to go to Walgreens, but instead they end up in someone's truck?
Sort of. What happens is that there are groups that buy up medications. It's sort of a reverse drug dealing. They buy up prescription medications, oftentimes from beneficiaries who receive the drugs at no cost through either Medicare or Medicaid, or through organized groups at individual institutions, gather those drugs, repackage them, and then ship them back out into the gray market through a process of laundering the wholesale paper.
I forgot to give out our telephone numbers. If you have a question or comment tonight for Bill Shepard, the call-in number for the Greater Palm Beach area is 561-844-6167. Toll free anywhere else in the world, 1-800-889-0267. Now, one of the most interesting cases to me that you worked on was the indictment of Jim Greer. Now, I understand that Jim's case hasn't gone to trial yet, so you're limited in what you could talk about. But
that's right.
How is it? Like, you're the statewide prosecutor and you hear, I guess a call comes into your office and they say, now we're investigating the chair of the Republican Party of Florida, who I assume you had met before that at some point in time, possibly.
As a matter of fact, I've never met him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But let me talk about it because
we thought all those Tallahassee people know each other statewide.
Right. Well, I spent a fair amount of time in Tallahassee, but since I had 8 offices around the state, it was important for me to be out in the field too and working with the lawyers who were working on the cases. But let me just talk about that in general, because as you correctly point out, Mr. Greer is a defendant in a pending criminal case, and obviously his constitutional rights, like any other Floridian charged with a crime, and that protect us all, frankly, are that he's innocent until proven guilty. But let me talk about just the statewide grand jury on public corruption and how that developed. I received a call from the governor's general counsel. This was Governor Christ at the time, and we had talked about a number of ideas over the course of time, and an idea that seemed relevant, particularly since Governor Christ, during his tenure, had to suspend more elected officials than any other governor at a much faster pace and rate because of criminal conduct.
Very disappointing.
The issue was, is it that law enforcement is just doing a better job and catching more people that were otherwise undetected in the past?